Good evening, everybody, and welcome to both councillors and tonight to our partners. This being the annual Overview and Scrutiny Crime and Disorder Committee. Just so that everybody knows, this meeting is being live streamed to the public. I don't think we have any members of the public present, as far as I can tell. This is an annual meeting of the Council Scrutiny Crime and Disorder Committee. It has the responsibility for the review and to scrutinise the decisions and actions taken by the Community Safety Partnership in connection with the discharge of its crime and disorder functions in line with the provisions of sections 19, 20 and 21 of the Police and Justice Act 2006. I have, in order to make the most effective use of the meeting time this evening, I became somewhat notorious at the last OSB meeting that we had a week or so back because we didn't manage to finish until 9 o'clock. And I have a request from some of the people present to try and not repeat that process tonight, if I can help it. So to make the most effective use of the meeting time, I'm going to change the order of business that from the papers that you've received. I will be taking agenda item 7 first, which is the introduction from the chair of the CSP, the Community Safety Partnership, which is Robin Porter, our chief exec. Robin will be doing his introduction online rather than being present, and he presents his apologies for doing that, but for personal reasons, he has to do that online this evening. I'll then be taking agenda item 10, which is the community policing and the current arrangements. And that will be presented by Alex House, I believe. That's him there just holding his hand up. Thank you, Alex. Then agenda item 9, the draft Luton CSP plan for 24-28, and Marek will be giving us the lead on that. We're going to be inviting comments on the draft plan, on its themes, priority, and the delivery focus. We then will have just brief single presentation slides from each of the theme leads and highlighting their priorities for the future. We'll then move on to agenda item 8, which is the progress and impacts of the CSP plan as it's gone on from 2020 to 2024. We did invite questions from members of the public, and we haven't in fact had any questions that I'm aware of. And I'm specifically asking that report authors, if they can, please to keep their presentations fairly short. We'll then be going into questions and answers, and this committee is known to actually be quite forthcoming in terms of its questions. So that's the basic introduction. Now, just to remind you, the meeting will be live streamed to the public, and if we move into private, I don't think we are going to move into private, but in the events that any of our meetings move into private, then that live stream stops. A recording of the meeting will be available on the council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. And would members and officers, anyone else presenting, please remember to switch their microphones on when they're speaking, and you'll get a little red circle on the end, and you've got a button in front of you. And speak directly into the microphone. When you finish speaking, if you can switch off the microphone. The reason behind that, for those of you who don't know, is that the system in here actually for the live streaming actually concentrates, and it is focused as partly as a result of the microphone usage. Anybody joining on a Teams link, please use the hands up icon on your screen to enable questions and comments or contributions. And again, please turn off camera and microphone, turn them on when you're speaking and off when you've finished. Anybody who has mobile phones with them, can they please remember to switch them off or on into silent mode, preferably off, so that we don't disturb the meeting. Okay, so if you're around, Robin, as the chair of CSP, over to you remotely, if you will, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, sorry, I've just been told, Robin, that I have to do my first bit, which I've forgotten. I usually do. Okay. So where am I then? Yes. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Raja.
Okay. Minutes of the last meeting, which was 9th of March. Anybody had a chance to have a look at those? Had any objection? It's a year ago, so no. Don't think I have any other announcements, do I?
Disagree.
Are the minutes agreed? Yes. Don't think I have any announcements. Any disclosures of interest? No. Any urgent business?
None, Chair.
Okay. Any references from committees and other bodies?
None, Chair.
Okay. In which case then, sorry, Robin, for the slight delay there. I'd forgotten to do the routines, but my boss is here soon. Put me right. So over to you, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just once again, apologies for not being with you in person. But thank you to the Crime and Disorder Committee and the Chair for this year's opportunity to focus in on some of the vitally important work being driven by partners across the Community Safety Partnership. And the reports before the committee this evening are wide in scope and provide updates on delivery and the planning across the whole of the CSP. This is a really important committee meeting for the CSP for a number of reasons. First, the delivery period for our 4-year plan, 2020 to 2024, finishes at the end of this month. At the same time, we've been preparing our newer CSP plan, which runs from 2024 to 2028, under the title Working Together to Help Our Community Be and Feel Safe. The progress and impacts and successes of the partnership's work to date, and it's covered in the report at item 8 in overview and detail, but many of the figures within that report are looking incredibly positive. And for the majority of the areas, and Gemma's just going to put them up onto the screen, but they are in your pack. For the majority of the areas, we have made very, very positive progress and can see a downward trend in the level of crime. So antisocial behaviour, burglary, downward trend, hate crime, domestic abuse, and on-street sexual exploitation. Now, that's not to say that everything in the garden is rosy, because we can see that, that there has been a substantial increase in graffiti and also litter, and I'll come back to that in a second. But of course, we know that communities continue to be impacted by criminality, and actually the actual stats and perception and the feelings of safety don't always match the evidence that we're seeing. So trust, communication, engagement is absolutely paramount here, and I'm delighted, Chair, and thank you for asking Alex to bring his report forward, because it really is the foundation of our work together and with our community. The report on progress today also highlights some of the key areas of cross-partnership activity the CSP has undertaken over the last year, increasingly in response to community concerns and working alongside and with them to co-produce solutions. We've initiated some new approaches to place-based working through the Dalloway Cares pilot and the rapid and sustained response to tackling knife crime and criminal exploitation of young people across the borough. Our Fairness Task Force programme, and we had a keynote event in June of last year, it's given us a new focus on bringing forward work to address inequality and disproportionality in the criminal justice system. In many ways, these steps mark a shift towards the next 4 years of our partnership and are reflected in the draft of our new plan, which is before the committee tonight for feedback and suggestions. Building on the innovation theme-based approach we've developed for the previous plan, and the new plan sets out a refocused set of themes that also speak directly to the current concerns of our residents and communities. We've been absolutely clear to centre this work going forward firmly within our 2040 programme, as everything that we do links back to 2040. We're also continually strengthening our partnership collaboration across the themes, and this focus, as well as that of our other 4 cross-cutting priorities of a commitment to tackling inequality and promoting fairness, place-based working, building trust, and 4th, communicating with our residents to provide reassurance and engaging with community perception. As Councillor Lovell, our community safety portfolio holder, said at a knife crime feedback event on Tuesday evening to over 100 residents and community organisers, if young people and communities in Luton don't feel safe, they will not be able to thrive. And we also feel and believe that the themes are working on collaboratively together will help with that crucial work around prevention and early intervention needed to address the social traumas and vulnerabilities that we know so often can and do drive people towards criminality. And finally, I'm really delighted as the chair of the CSP that we've also, for the first time in a long time, been able to put in place a community safety manager. So we've got a new CSP manager, Gemma Widderfield, who's here with us tonight on her 4th day in the social justice unit to help drive our team's commitments forward on this critical agenda for the town over the coming years. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Robin. You hopefully saw our new team member. I'd just like to say welcome on board, and let's see how all of this works out. Okay. As threatened at the beginning, we're going to start off with agenda item 10, which is looking at community policing. For those of you who've got the same papers as me, the item is on page 102, if that's of any help to you. Alex, I think it's all over to you, sir. You don't necessarily need to stand up if you prefer. You can sit down as long as you talk directly into the mic.
Thank you, Chair. I talk better when I stand. Yes, item 10, community policing Luton. There is a paper which are in the file, so I don't intend, for the sake of time, to go into the detail that's already in there, but the figures speak for themselves a little bit in terms of crime. I'll start with, as per the headlines on the slide, and that is that we've had an additional investment at the Knife Crime Summit in December. The Chief Constable pledged a new superintendent, which is me. I was the Chief Inspector for Community Policing at the time, but they've added to the command resilience for the town in the form of a superintendent, which is me. And my role is also a county-wide one around prevention and problem solving to support the work that's ongoing and all the good stuff that Robin just mentioned. We have maintained the serious and organised crime DCI in local policing, and that's an unusual move because that would normally sit within the intelligence or the crime world, of which there is already one, but there's one sitting within the command team for local policing. So community policing gets the benefit of somebody with serious crime understanding, and so they add to that layer of problem solving. In addition to that, there is the new chief inspector that has backfilled me, Adrian Cunningham, who couldn't be here tonight. He's chairing another meeting this evening. And in addition to that, there will be 10 new community constables in the establishment across Bedfordshire, probably with a heavy weighting, I would hope, to Luton and the town centre specifically as a bit of an exit strategy for Operation Metal, which I'll come to in a little while. That's in addition to the last year where there was an uplift of 10 across the county, which included 4 for the Luton area. In addition, at the Knife Crime Summit, the chief also promised 4 additional constables and 3 PCSOs to bolster the education and diversion team for the county, which has been fulfilled. And we have 100% of the inspectors for Luton and sergeant posts in community policing filled, and over 80% of the PCE posts that were filled, which is a massive improvement on where we were this time last year. That has been a big challenge to make sure that we get that to that position so we can provide those services to our communities. PCSO recruitment presents different challenges, but because we recruit from externally, but that is a piece of ongoing work, and we'll see some new ones coming hopefully on an intake this month. And then we have the crime statistics, as already mentioned, where we have residential burglary down, but robbery is down, theft from motor vehicles is down, antisocial behaviour is down, hate crime is down, and knife crime. Whilst we've seen on Robin's figures a blip, we have to consider that, bless you, that those knife crimes do spike when we do police focused activity, because we find people in possession where we wouldn't do it otherwise. So those additional that slight upturn, if you like, in the last 4 years worth of figures is probably reflective of more police activity in combating knife crime, which is well, is worth explaining, because that an upward trend is not always a bad one. And that's it from the headlines for item 10.
Right, thank you. We'll start the questions. You were the first one to put your hand up, Councillor Frank. So,
for the last 2 years, the Police and Crime Commissioner has told us that the over-the-top increase in the police precept on the council tax is to invest in neighbourhood policing. It hasn't happened. Why isn't he here to apologise and explain to us what his excuses are?
I can't speak on behalf of the Police and Crime Commissioner. That's not my role. However, I will say, as I've just said, there are 10 uplifts in community policing of constables last year and a further 10 in the coming year.
Good evening. Ian O'Connor, I'm the Deputy Commissioner. I've got to say, I have to disagree with the councillor, as the Chief Inspector said, Alex. There has been an increase in the number of community police officers. There is further investment in community police officers as well. And when you look at the number of schemes such as Clearhold Building, Dallow Cares, etc., that is about community policing, and the work that's been done on Op Metal in the town centre, and the work that's being done right now on Octan in Hightown. That's all about community policing. So I'm afraid I have to disagree with comments from the councillor.
Well, what else can I say? We've had the promise 2 years running and it hasn't happened. And if there has been an increase in neighbourhood police resources, then certainly I haven't yet spoken to anyone who's noticed it, and I haven't.
any
Would only add that the positions are there. They've been filled. They're 80% of where we should be. So the facts are that there are 10 extra in community policing and a further 10 to come. So I'm not, if you haven't seen them, then I don't know where you've been and where they are at the same time. It's obviously.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. What I was going to say in terms of these 10 extra community policing, can you confirm how many will be in Luton? Because my understanding is those 10 have been deployed in some of the villages around Bedfordshire rather than Luton.
Yeah, some of them will be. So it was an evenish spread. I think we ended with, it's something like, and you'll forgive me if I'm wrong, 4 for Luton, 3 for Bedford, 3 for Central, but that may have been slightly altered. We might have 5 in Luton and 3 and 2 in the other 2 CSP areas. So that was last year, and then with this year, the final locations as to where they will go haven't been decided, other than a commitment of 4 to the Luton Town Centre out of the 10 before any more are divided out of that, which I think is positive.
Thank you. Can I had a follow-up question around the crime rates, domestic burglary, robbery. I know you're saying the trend is down, but how much is that of people actually losing confidence in the police and not actually reporting them?
Certain crime types, I'd say, could be put down to that, as could burglary and robbery. We tend not to see that evidentially. Robbery tends to be, especially burglary, residential burglary, tends to be reported quite accurately by comparison. But there are some crime types that I would say that could be reflective of lack of confidence, but they're not 2 that I would usually expect.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I have to concur with Councillor Franks that I've looked at those figures. I'm not quite sure where the Deputy PCC has actually got his figures from, but the precept has gone up, and there was a definite promise that came from the PCC that we were going to get more community policing. And there's something that's missing, if I could point out to you, please, Superintendent. But there's no mention of drugs and the drug problem here. I have to say that there has been a resident survey going out in many of the wards, including in my ward, and every single resident, without fail, pointed out the major issue was drug problems. And the drug problems, for example, in my ward are all across Southwood. The police know where they are. They know where the problems are. I went out for a high-vis action day with Sergeant Saqib Khan and his team. Very helpful. I had a good time out, met the officers involved. But even he and the team admit they do not have the resources to go round. So something is amiss. Something is definitely amiss here, and it needs to be. It's pleasing to see some extra resources come in, but it's not enough. And we need to have more patrols going out into the hotspots where the police know where they are on a daily basis, because there's no way we're going to be able to combat this crime. And it's people in the wards that are seeing this as a major issue that they're seeing on a day-to-day basis. In the tower blocks in Newtown, for example, in Parktown, for example, you know, young people are coming in, taking their drugs on a daily basis. And using the downstairs as a drug taking and drug dealing place. I pointed it out to the police. I went round as I was doing some casework, and I met kids on the stairways that were doing weed. I walked out, and there was another group of people that were doing crack cocaine as I walked out of the bin, and this is in daylight. So it's not, I have to say that I'm sorry, but there's not all the priorities have been. It's not even mentioned in your list here, and it's one of the key priorities that we're facing in all the wards.
Yeah, thank you for raising that, Councillor. If I may come back to that one, so if you would like to say drugs measure in the next year's report, happy to do that. I need to know what you would like that to look like, because if I report the number of drugs arrests that we have, I could do that. It would make, because it's a police generated arrest, i.e. if we don't go out looking for it, it doesn't get recorded. So it's a reflection of how busy we are with regards to that. So that I could do that for next year if you want, because it's not a good, not necessarily a measure of good or bad, depending on how we've deployed. There is a force drug strategy with a 4P plan with prevent, protect, pursue and prepare wrapped around it with plans. I'm personally going to lead on the prevention arm of that strategy. I'm new in post and have been for just a matter of days really, but have been working on this in my previous role as the Chief Inspector for the town under Operation Metal, which I'll probably touch on in one of the latter slides that come up. But the focus very much was around the drug crime in the town centre initially, because that's where the most chronic problem has been. Once we have a foothold on that, then we can then focus on the other areas with a problem solving approach, which is where we can do that with the increasing community officers that we do have. So that's the plan.
I mean, that's a fair comment, but it doesn't satisfy or give any kind of answer to the residents in the wards. I mean, they're reporting these issues. Sometimes they've given up reporting the issues. It might be an idea not just to report and to look at the number of the arrests, but the number of reports that that's gaining, because we can then see why aren't they not being followed up by the police? I think we need to be able to scrutinise those kind of figures and perhaps take something back to the PCC to say, look, you know, you promised the extra resourcing. We have some resourcing. It's insufficient. And that people in their daily lives are coming across this problem, and either because they're seeing the dealing. I mean, you can go around almost any time of day. In that area that I went to in Stockwood Crescent with the team, I'd actually seen people actually doing it in the daylight whilst I was there, and the police are aware of it. They're also aware of the begging that goes on in the town. That's also affecting people on a daily basis. If you go up London Road near the traffic lights, you'll see guys in the middle of the road begging from car to car. There's going to be an accident. The police are again aware of this point. I understand from Sergeant Sakib, he's planning perhaps to do a day of action also to look at begging around the town, because this is another thing that gives the impression to the residents of the town that the town is going downhill.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and again, you probably find that a large percentage of the antisocial behaviour from the begging is linked to a drugs trade, which is where we focus on the drugs. The challenge is, do we focus on the beggars and the users, which we should be, and we will try to. But we should also be focusing on those who peddle the drugs, those who are organised criminals, because without them, there is no drug trade. If we can focus on those people, which we do have a serious and organised crime DCI dedicated to the team, we have a serious and organised crime plan, which is refreshing as we speak, and if we can take out the drug dealers and those who peddle the misery and those who exploit our children and encourage our children to then take the drugs, or our children to carry knives to protect themselves because they're running drugs for them, that's where we need to focus. So there is focus at all levels, and Sakib is right. There will be days of action and so forth, but by using a lot of resource intensive activity around a beggar, where, you know, actually by putting them before a court rather than maybe in front of drug and alcohol services would only exacerbate the problem, because you find them, they're not going to go to prison for an offence begging, and then they've got to find more money, and the only means they know how to do that on top of their habit is by begging, or potentially worse, committing, you know, crimes like theft. So the challenge is balance. I agree, it all needs tackling, but the users are very resource intensive, as are the tackling the dealers and the organised criminals, which is really where, if we can give that a concerted focus. And I was going to say this comment for later on, but actually the work we've been doing in the last 6 months in the town centre.
Can I just stop you 1 second? I know that online Robin wanted to come in, and Adam has also asked to make an input onto this. Okay, now Robin, you're welcome to join in if you wish.
Thanks, Chair. Just three quick things to say. First off, across all public sector organisations, resources are stretched, and we have not got as much resource as we would like for the Luton system. That means that we need to coordinate as best as possible. And just to mention that on this agenda, over the last 18 months, we have been developing a Bedfordshire-wide serious harm board, which has got oversight and looks at 3 elements. First is the government's 10-year drug strategy, which Sally may say a little bit more about. The second is the Bedfordshire VERU, the Violence and Exploitation Reduction Unit. The third is serious violence duty. So all statutory organisations now have a responsibility under the serious violence duty to coordinate. So we're doing that through the auspices of a Bedfordshire-wide serious harm board, trying to ensure that we're having the greatest long-term impact, driving down the level of drugs in our community, driving down the level of harm in our community from the drugs trade. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you for the report. I mean, it's good to see the trends are coming down. I don't mean to pour cold water on what's happening, but we know, I mean, recent statistics are 60% of crimes go unreported. And just, you know, even when people come to our surgeries, they're saying that they've lost, I think we've got a crisis of confidence in policing. A lot of people don't report the crime. When you look at car theft, me and my colleague Councillor Abbas wrote to the, I know you're not here to speak on behalf of the Commissioner, only 1% of people engaged in car thefts are charged. And a lot of people have just stopped kind of reporting the crimes. And I just wonder kind of, are we really capturing the full picture? And I'd love to have concrete measures on what we're going to do to restore community trust in policing, because I think that needs to be a key theme, given what we're hearing from residents on the ground.
Yeah, I think the challenge is reporting the good work we do. If you take ourselves back to the horrific events at the end of September around knife crime, with the fatal stabbing of Ashraf Abimana, I think there were a lot of questions around what the police and partners and everybody were all doing about knife crime, and actually the answer was a lot. It's just that nobody was either we weren't publicising what we were doing, or nobody was interested when it wasn't as big a problem in their eyes. And so the challenge for us is how do we communicate these messages to people around what we were already doing and what we're currently doing. There's social media, but not everybody uses that. There's newsletters, well, not everyone will reuse those. There's email shots, well, we could reach people if they give us their emails, and there is a real challenge there around how we communicate what we already do. And that is part of the key to instilling confidence is we produce the good results. But I'm you know, we can do a lot more good, but then it's very hard to communicate that to people.
Believe me, it's not a matter that the residents are not interested. It really is a case, and I totally endorse what was just said, that the community is unfortunately losing faith in being able to report crimes in many cases. That's the impression I get from my community anyway.
I mean, there are more ways than reporting crimes than ever before. You report it online. There's phone calls. There's, you know, attending buildings in person. There's many ways to report. And actually, I guess the question would be, or the challenge would be, I'm looking around the room for help, because if I'm standing here and you all know that crime is down, burglary is down, that's a good news story. We've worked hard to tackle the causes of that crime, and therefore, unless an indicative of that is those neighbourhood crimes, the residential burglaries, the robberies, the theft from motor vehicles, antisocial behaviour, knife crime, they're all linked to the drugs strategy and the drug trade. So they're down, so it's probably good. And it would suggest how many people here have fed that back to the people they're representing.
Question from the councillor over here.
My question and a comment, actually. So I'll ask you the question first of all. Point number 5 that you've got in this report, how do you think this is going to look? So when you're saying that this new person is going to provide command resilience to Luton Borough Council, what is that going to look like, first of all?
Anybody answer that previous question? I'll come to that in a second. Has anyone fed back to the people they represent around the figures that
Well,
news stories
that's
collected?
quite difficult in a way, because what we're getting back, Superintendent, is the fact that there aren't enough policing. This is the view. There's not enough policing out on the roads. This is the view that they're getting. So we can't, even if we try to put back the positive, in some ways it's lost, because people say that they've reported things and nothing happens. And as I've said about the drug issue, you know, they keep pointing out and nothing happens. So it's not easy. We would love to, I think, put the positive, but it's not so easy to put the positive, you know, when we're facing that as well.
But maybe that would increase confidence. I mean, and again, the challenge we have is the communication, and obviously, if you represent large groups of the community, if you can say, well, actually, it may be that this is, but actually on a town-wide, things are improving, and that might increase confidence, which will increase people's likelihood of reporting to us. So that is an ask from me then, is if people could, rather than just nod when they turn around to the communities and say, oh, the police aren't doing anything. Well, actually, the police are reducing burglary, robbery and theft from motor vehicle. They're working with their partners around youth violence, working with the Veru, working with, youth services, working, in partnership to do all these sort of things. So it would be really helpful, because that would help. The question is, what are we doing to instill confidence, Councillor? Well,
I understand what you're saying. Can I just talk back to the question?
Question first of all, before I go into mine then. In that sense, I got burgled quite a few years ago. I reported it to the police. It just happened that a patrol car was going past, that we stopped, my friend stopped the car, and we kind of reported it that way. So yes, it has been reported, but in terms of action, I heard nothing back up until this day, other than that first initial visit from the forensics team on that night, and the day after from the DCI. I had absolutely nothing. I heard nothing. And it wasn't at a time when it was just my house that got burgled. Quite a few houses in that local area got burgled. And the only thing that I got told, which does not give me confidence in the police, is that, oh, well, Asian people are being targeted at the moment.
When was that?
This is going back, it is before COVID. So I think about 2015, towards the end of 2015.
Yeah. I apologise for that experience. The challenge is if people have had bad experiences, then say I apologise. For me, we need to look at where we are now and what we're doing now, because there was a different chief constable then, a different PCC then, and again, I don't. That's not making light of it, but we're in a different place. 10 years ago, things have changed, and actually, if we want people to become confident in us, it's almost there's a point where we have to say, well, let's look at how the police are performing now, rather than where they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because we've changed. We need to. If we want to get people to be confident and report, then we need that.
Okay, so I'll accept your answer for the time being, but looking at this report, because it's quite basic. I mean, you've asked us now that you're looking around the room and you want us to support you. You've given us a quick slide and you've gone through those figures. You've gone through this. Just from this and from that little presentation, I can't really see what it is that I can support you with, because you haven't given me enough information for me to even plug in those gaps.
What would you like?
Can we, before you reply, because it's related, can I just go back to Councillor McBoot here, because I think he wants to come back in and make some further comment.
Yeah, look, I completely understand and appreciate you're working with stretched resources, funding cuts. I completely get that, and I know you've got a tough job. I'll offer something constructive in a bit, but I don't think the answer is necessarily right. I get that us guys going out there and championing what the police is doing is important, and we have done that. I sit on the Beds Crime panel. We do talk to our communities. I'll give you one example. We'll be here all night for that specific examples, but one broad example. When we went to Lucy, when the commissioner came with us, shop owners constantly being shoplifting, burglaries. They were told that they're going to have the CCTV collected. They were waiting 6 weeks, a lot of them, just to have CCTV packs collected. Maybe it's a breakdown in communication. They were told they could have uploaded it online. Yeah. I get that, but I mean, by way of a constructive suggestion, in Chorley Ward, we've got 2 police community support officers that drop into our surgeries now, and that's brilliant because we get to talk to them. They talk to us about the work they're doing. Maybe not chopping and changing. I don't know if this is your remit, but chopping and changing the community support or the community neighbourhood policing, whoever it is, making them more embedded in ward surgeries, so we know who they are. That is one way of increasing confidence.
That I can take away, definitely.
Yeah,
we do allocate officers per ward as best we can with where resources permit. And actually, at the moment, with the resources numbers we've got now, we're probably able to do that. So yeah, I'll take that away.
I think the key to restoring trust in policing is
Yeah.
visible policing and also solving crime. I mean, at the moment, the residents, we're just feeling about the residents saying that not enough crime has been solved. Even when we go on the police's own website, the data that we've got in terms of how we sit in terms of the rest of the country for burglaries, for thefts, it's not looking good at all.
Councillor Fry?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to your question, really, because it sort of comes back to what Councillor Abbas and Councillor Mahmood have already said. I know from my own ward where I had an issue with antisocial behaviour, for example, the people there that were vulnerable were telling me they weren't reporting it because they didn't think anything was getting done. I did talk to the community police officers there and something did improve and they were very happy about it. I know through our Let's Talk as well, the same issues were getting raised about not reporting it. And the community police officers there were very clear in saying that if you don't report it, we don't know where the hotspots are, we can't put in our resources. So maybe it's something we need to work together more closely with. I mean, certainly we do that with our Let's Talk and we put it out on our focuses, but maybe we need to do that with the wider council as well to get that message out there and celebrate those positives when they do happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. We're an organisation, as most have to be, which is steered by data. And if we know, we can only know what we know. So when people tell us, if we can, we react, we respond. Obviously, we have to prioritise because we're finite resources. But that sums it up perfectly. Something we are looking into is potentially trying to find a way of making it easier for people to report, even if it was just an anonymous app or something on your phone or something, rather than having on the phone or having to log onto a computer website, even if it's just intelligence, so they can say we're experiencing ASB or drug dealing in this footwell, stairwell, whichever, because that's and having spoken to the businesses, for example, in Bury Park, they're very time poor. They've got busy businesses to run. They can't be hanging on the phone to report some intelligence or, for as long as it takes. So we need to try and speed that up. But there's reasons it has to take so long at the moment. But if we can, that would be, that working together, I think, is the answer.
Certainly, and that would be really useful because I think most people these days do have phones. I know the elderly may not do, but certainly with my own ward, where we had those successes, the constituents there that were involved with that particular issue said, I'm going to report absolutely everything now. So it does make a real positive impact when it works.
It's a positive spiral. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Councillor Marshall, you want to join it?
Yeah, just to support what Councillor Fry has said, we hold regular ward meetings called Let's Talk, as Jill's referred them to, and your officers are there and they're there constantly.
Good.
I don't deny for a minute you've got a heck of a job to do with very little resources, with a government that doesn't support you in terms of what you're trying to do. And the message out in the public at the moment that we get from our residents is that they don't see a presence. The Let's Talk's a really good opportunity for your officers to deliver back to the community. At the moment, what happens, they turn up regularly, they'll get battered by the local residents about drugs, the other issues which are facing. And, it's a problem across the whole country. It's not just Luton or Bedfordshire, but maybe if your officers were briefed, we can make an opportunity for them to actually deliver that at a Let's Talk. And we as ward councillors would be more than happy to support that. That wouldn't be a problem because they turn up every month. They know they're going to get a kicking. It's not very counterproductive. The residents get something off the chest because they feel frustrated. You haven't got the resources to do the job that you really, I'm sure, passionately want to do. But if we want to give it the positive on the side of it, I think that would be something that I would be really keen for the Lib Dem Wars to take on board, Chair. But anyway.
I'd like our new officer to join in. She's had her hand up, been very patient.
Thank you, Chair. So I hope it's okay to put on a slightly different hat, but up until this week, I worked for the Priority Antisocial Behaviour Team for Luton Council, based up at Luton Police Station. And I just wanted to say that community policing, I don't see it as about being just policing. I think it's partnership working. And Alex, I've worked with your teams for a long time now. And actually, community policing in Luton is looking the best I've seen it in a long time. We've got a sergeant, two sergeants in the town centre, Siraj and Mark. They have increased patrols in the town centre visibility. I was down there yesterday, saw 2 police officers walking by. We've got operations going on. And actually, the police, local policing and Luton Council work very closely together. And it doesn't always fall on the police to take action. The council, in partnership with the police or on their own, they can get closure notices. So if there is an issue with a property where drugs are being used, etc., the council, we can gather evidence, and it can be third-hand evidence as well. If someone's worried about reporting to the police, they can come to the council and report that antisocial behaviour, and we can go to court and get those closure notices. In relation to people asking for money, yes, it looks terrible. I spoke to people in the town centre the other day when we were talking about renewing our public spaces protection order in the town centre. What people don't realise is the chances are that person who's asking for money has probably got a criminal behaviour order or maybe a community protection notice warning, and they've probably been breached. They're probably waiting for a court date, and the court dates are out of our hands. So the police and council issue those community behaviour orders, or CPNWs as we call them as well. So I just wanted to say, and also drugs is very frustrating, but just because you don't see action, it doesn't mean that action is not being taken. The council and the police, we submit intel, which then may need to go to another department to develop that intelligence picture. We've got some superb work going on in Luton about county lines as well. And I know that Tony Stefano is going to speak about antisocial behaviour as well later. But I just wanted to say, having just left that arena, community policing in Luton, thanks to Alex and his teams, is looking better than it has done for a long time. So yeah, thank you for listening.
I just come back. There was a sea of hands earlier on from my left here. Want to come back in? No? No. Okay. Anybody else want to come back in? Yes, sir.
Just 2 quick points. I think we all know that huge proportions of burglary, theft of and from cars, street robbery, the knife problem, huge proportions are connected in one way or another with the drug problem. And here we are having a go at the police who, to be quite honest, have an impossible task. What we should be doing is putting more pressure in a place where the problem could be resolved, and that is the government. Because the government has chosen, and not just the current government, but successive governments have chosen to leave this multi-billion-pound illegal drug business completely in the control of violent criminals. That's a choice the government has made. There are alternatives. There are other ways it could be dealt with, but they choose, probably for fear of Daily Mail headlines, to leave the business where it is controlled by violent criminals. That's where the real problem lies.
Just one last thing from me. It's good to hear that there are sort of officers present in some of these Let's Talk events. It'd be nice if we can have all our wards at least be attended once, at least, if not a month, at least every couple of months, to have an officer attending, because we don't really see, especially in Lucy, we had one walkabout with 2 officers, but that's all I can say, because I know that residents have been asking for a Let's Talk event with officers, but nobody's ever been able to make time. So just across the board, to keep all our residents feel like they are part of this community, if we can have at least some officers present at some of these Let's Talk across the board, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I couldn't agree more. A consistent approach is what's required. It shouldn't be that this ward gets it and that ward doesn't. There are more officers than there were now. We've recently had an influx that come into post because we've been recruiting. I'll take that back and I will ask my teams to make sure they're there. Whether we can make it more productive in terms of preparing the officers, we say about having them turn up and get moaned at, actually that it can be productive, that so that whether they take actions away and come back next month or something, so that there is some productive outcome from it, then that would be a good use of their time. I agree.
I didn't want to sound highly critical, and I realise that there's a resourcing issue. I just want to say one positive thing for you might like to hear. On my way here, actually, one of the police cars stopped me, and it was some of the police that I saw in around Stockwood Crescent, and they were on their way to do a meet the residents up in Farley Hill. So I just wanted to put that positive thing in.
Yeah. We are trying to encourage the teams to advertise their engagements more on police.uk and the local websites, and we are pushing for that. So residents will know where they're going to be and when, but the better coverage, and a consistent approach is exactly what we're after. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Because if not, yes, Adam.
Just a small point, and just to echo Gemma's feedback, we have got a really positive relationship with the police on the officer side, which is improving each month, really. So that's a huge positive. But just on the engagement piece and the knife crime work, we've had some huge results recently around engagement, but that has taken a lot of effort from all sides to bring people around the table. And I think it's shown the value of more community engagement. So I think we'll be talking about how we may do more of that in future. But in terms of members having the right toolkit, as it were, to go to communities, I think, Alex, perhaps we can talk again about members having a sort of toolkit of engagement they can take out and know exactly what they need to say to communities, not just the stats, but numbers to call and so on, building that confidence piece we talked about. So I think there's a piece of work we can look at, Alex, with the two teams. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just to go back to where it was, I think that what was said a few moments ago is true. I think the community is well aware of the fact that the police in Newton are under-resourced for the challenges that we face. So there's no question about that, and I'm happy that my residents understand that's at any rate in my ward. But when we do need to make sure that when, for example, at our Let's Talk meetings where we've had your police people present, they put forward statistics similar to the ones that we've seen in this report, but the resident response has been a disbelief, because they say, well, unfortunately, there's a lot of crime goes unreported, and that's the biggest issue, because then they see the thing which says burglaries have gone down or vehicle thefts have gone down. They just haven't reported them. And therefore, I think we need to concentrate more on how do we work together between the community, the councillors and the police, and how we work together, rather than an over-concentration, for example, at our Let's Talk meetings, where they gave all sorts of statistics, sorry, get the word out right in the end, but which the residents didn't believe. So I think if we concentrate more on how we work together, that's going to be great. But sorry if you feel that you've come here and got a good bashing, but there is very strong feeling about the way in which the community is policed, and we are conscious of the fact that you're under-resourced. For an area like Luton, you should be resourced like in London Borough, and we're not. But thank you very much indeed for the report, and appreciate your time and your patience for actually being there and being our target for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, and the Deputy Commissioner wishes.
Mr. Chairman, you just made a very poignant point just there. We aren't pleased and funding it as a London Borough. If we were funded at the same level per household as the Met, we'd have another 400 police officers. And that's it. When you bear in mind, at the end of March, we will have 1,467 officers. 400 additional is a huge amount of resource that we don't get as we're funded as a rural police force.
Yes, I understand that, and I've had that discussion with Festus before. But it still remains that we are very badly understaffed given the level of activity and criminal activity in our borough. But thank you very much. Yes, I entirely agree. Thank you. So thank you very much. So, yeah, that's my turn to be naughty. Okay. So moving on then next to agenda item 9, which in my papers at least is starting on page 67, if that's any help to anybody. And Marek, I think you're in charge.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for that conversation that we just had, because I think it sort of helped us introduce this next item, which is about where we go from here. And colleagues have pointed to some of the challenges that we've got around the work of community safety in the town with our communities, both the negatives, but also some of the positives and the opportunities. And I think that's really what we are trying to do in setting out this new plan, to learn from what we've been doing over the last 4 years and some of the really impactful work that has been happening, some of the improvements that colleagues have pointed out, but also some of the deficits, the matter of trust, the matter of equity and fairness, and the perhaps missed opportunities for collaboration that we've had, and coordination and lack of resources over that period. So the plan in front of you for the committee, and I'm really happy that we've been able to bring it. It's been a really good opportunity for us to come at a draft stage, a very draft stage, an early stage, to come to the Crime and Disorder Committee and get your feedback. And because it is very much work in progress in trying to frame and make sense of the last 4 years and think forward for the future. You've got the paper in front of you. You've got the draft plan as well. And Robin, of course, has given a lot of context already about the direction of travel and the focus. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of points that I think are really salient, and then I'll hand over to our theme leads, because as the paper explains, we've taken the step back in 2020 to organise the CSP around theme leads and share the responsibility collectively as a team, as a partnership for delivery, and to try to find ways to support each other in that process. And I think the new plan builds on that and takes it hopefully to a next stage. But a critical point, I think, is that we fully recognise now how anchored the plan needs to be within the broader 2040 programme. Its long-term vision, its focus on prevention and early intervention, its focus on community and co-production. So that's a really, really critical part of what we're trying to do. And if we move to the next slide, please. Thank you. There's some really, really very explicit outcomes already in the 2040 programme, which we want this plan to speak to directly, around children and young people and safety, the driving down on the key areas of crime that affect our communities, that focus on domestic abuse and serious violence, particularly drugs, but also building resilience, and that partnership and that focus on the most vulnerable at a community level, that our ward councillors can play such a critical role. And if we give them the right tools, as Adam has said, if we've got the toolkit, we're building up, we're collaborating with our police partners and our community partners together around that. Equity being a central theme, and of course a new focus. I think this is one of the really important parts of the plan going forward. We have a distinct theme on the town centre now, and it's sort of symbolic importance for the town, because if people feel good about the town centre, they're going to feel better about the town, and hopefully their neighbourhood as well. And ideally both are going in the right direction through a similar set of ingredients. But Alex will say a bit more about that in a second, because he has the unenviable job of also being the theme lead for the town centre in the plan. If we just move to the next slide, please. we're also in 2040 as a whole trying to understand things from a resident point of view. And again, it's been refreshing to hear from councillors the reality that you hear from your residents, and we know you represent them and feed back those concerns and those aspirations, and we want the plan to speak very clearly to that. And these are some of the statements I think we understand are coming through from our residents, from our perception survey, from the survey in schools that we do on an annual basis around young people's perception of feeling safe or not safe in Luton, from our fairness task force work collaborating with voluntary sector partners, and this gives us a really clear steer about what kind of place Luton needs to be, what kind of neighbourhoods we want to live in, and what kind of work we want to do together to improve it. So these will be at the heart of the plan, and we will refer to them in our focus and our delivery. And finally, just to touch on the new theme structure, if we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So colleagues will recognise this, great diagram that emerged out of the 2020 partnership. My colleague Vicky Hawkes, instrumental in drawing that up. But we've added, as I said, a central theme now. So we've moved from 7 to 8 themes, and in the middle there you can see town centre safety as being a critical one for us. We've also reframed some of the themes in response to some of the data that we're seeing, but also some of the trends that we've got going on in the town. Our duty, our serious violence duty, of course, that's come in as of January 2024, but particularly the perception and voice of our communities, and the safeguarding of children theme, I think, is a particularly important one, which Dave will pick up on in a second. We've done a lot of work over the last 6 months, particularly, but his service over several years in reframing that piece of work around prevention and around working with community partners and responding to community concerns, and also dealing with perception. And I think that's a theme that is coming through very importantly from this discussion. We've also put an explicit focus on hate crime, which was not in the previous plan, and we know that's a really important matter for our community across a range of issues, whether it's anti-Muslim hate crime against people with disabilities, discrimination against sexual minorities. We've heard it through our fairness strategy work, but it's a lived experience which isn't getting picked up, and we need to engage with it. So we need to strengthen that theme and the work of that very much. So a few points to build on Robin's introduction. You have the papers, and I think we're going to hear now from the theme leads briefly, a couple of slides each, max 3 minutes or so, just to give their take on the overview and priorities that they are focusing on as we go forward for the next 4 years. Thank you, Chair.
So what sequence are you going to use? Who's coming in next?
Well, unfortunately, they're in the sequence as set out in the papers, and once again, we have a man of many hats and talents who is going to report on violence exploitation theme. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to try and sneak out while Marek was talking then. No, so DCI Tom Steen. So this is the Serious and Organised Crime DCI. Tom works within community policing. He's very good, very experienced in a background of serious and organised crime. He's a detective, having investigated serious crime, but also from an intelligence point of view. And he really understands this, and he has put together the 4 serious and organised crime reduction strategy, of which obviously the knife crime and everything that drugs sort of comes out of that, because it's, as we've already pointed out, a lot of organised crime is drug crime, and that then leads to this neighbourhood crime and the quality of life issues that we've all been discussing previously. So I'm conscious about my time slot. So in essence, without wishing to read too much from that, because everybody can see it, but ultimately this is about working with our partners to prevent our young people from getting involved in this, getting involved in that being exploited. And this is so working with youth services and so forth around that, working with education and diversion, and making sure that our children don't fall foul of that exploitation, that falling into criminality and actually, knife crime and all the rest of it that has had our town in mourning for too many times. Equally, we have gangs and county lines as a focus, which we've been working on, but that continued work around multi-agency work, again, with youth services and our partners in health and everything else around referring those people who are on the fringe of gang violence and gang activity with that multi-agency joined up approach. We'll continue to build on we've had 4 years of quite significant disruptions against gangs and organised crime and county lines drug dealing, with knife crime and so forth, and we've made some real inroads in that. We've disrupted quite a lot of those lines and locked quite a lot of quite serious evil drug dealers and organised criminals away, putting them away. It's about then making sure we don't let them step back into that void that we've created. We've obviously moved towards a place-based problem-solving approach where, and I'll go into more detail maybe if you let me on the next slide that I do around the town centre, but ultimately this is about things like Dallow Cares and the initiative there. It's about galvanising our communities and equipping them, for that longer term. But just the activity that we've worked on there has saved society something like £1.5 million in the costs of crime on society. That's not the cost of just policing it. That's the costs of the harm that's caused it to health, to our partners in LBC, to insurance companies and businesses as well. Their home office figures that we can work out. So that's a substantial amount of work that's been achieved there. That then means that those services are more free to deal with their other more pressing business. And obviously we'll continue to work on those who commit the most harm against our town and our communities, and raising awareness and working in partnership with our various services to achieve that. So that's where we're going with the violence and exploitation.
I'll go through the themes first, and then we'll come back to questions, and we'll split them down again into the same theme. So the next section, I think we're over to David Collins.
Thank you, Chair.
Safeguarding children. Theme lead, apparently.
I am indeed, Chair, and I kind of feel like I'm interfering with Alex's show tonight, but here goes. Given this is moved in the agenda, it makes it slightly more difficult for me because I need really to kind of look at my current theme to explain why we're developing into this second theme. So I might save a little bit of time further on in the agenda if I'm given more than 3 minutes, or I take more than 3 minutes. So my theme has always been around statutory youth justice. So it's to the Community Safety Partnership. It's been about reporting first-time entrants, which for simplicity means stopping young people offending in Luton. One, reducing reoffending, so the quality of the work you do with young people once they're with your service, and reducing custody. And the reality is this year is no different from X amount of years. We have performed extremely well in terms of statutory youth justice. The Youth Justice Board attended our Strategic Management Board last week and confirmed that we're still in the top tranche in the country for first-time entrants. So we've made comparisons about Luton being like London boroughs, and with the issues that are presented in London boroughs, we not only outperform those, we outperform areas like Dorset, Devon and Cornwall in relation to that. So as a partnership, we're doing some phenomenal work. However, every time I present this theme, invariably we get down to questions about criminal exploitation, children involved in knives and children involved in gangs, quite rightly. And, despite the achievements of youth justice, in the past 6 years, we've seen increasing numbers of our children coming into our multi-agency gangs panel, which again, in the whole context and development of this scrutiny panel, but the Community Safety Partnership, this was one of the developments that started as part of that. Is really concerning. And if you look at the events of September last year, the group of young people that were arrested and are currently remanded into custody for the tragic fatality of the 16-year-old young person demonstrate perfectly the issues that we're dealing with here. So 6 young people remanded into custody, all charged with murder. None of those young people have committed an offence before. So effectively, they're first-time entrants if they're convicted. All of those young people were either subject to some form of exclusion or not in any employment. All of those young people have been subject to trauma throughout their lives. All of the young people have, and their families, have reached out for help, that, you know, and it's not for me to make political statements here, but, you know, the critical lack of funding into our young people over the last 10 years has created this generation. So what we have is a situation where, okay, these young people were known to the multi-agency gangs panel, and that's the strength of this partnership, that at some point the community, a school, a police officer, a parent reported these in. But of course, these come into a space where it's voluntary. Now, we're getting these young people who are so entrenched in this behaviour that it becomes that much more difficult to break them away from it. We've made improvements over the last year, and like I say, that, you know, for those of you that have been witness to some of the summits, particularly the one this week, which was hosted by our youth council, it's just absolutely phenomenal. And, you know, community organisations now with access to funding from various places, we fund somewhere in the region of 35 community organisations delivering for young people. But as shocking as those 6 are on remand, we've got 232 young people in the multi-agency gangs panel at the moment, and 92% of them fit the same criteria as these young people. So when I was looking at my new theme, I wanted to get into the real deep dive of this and, you know, understand what's happening with these young people as they're being drawn into the multi-agency gangs panel. There are a number of really, really big ticket as well as little ticket ideas that have come out of the last 4 months. Some of them, you know, I mean, I can have individual conversations with you. I'd love to come to your Let's Talk meetings that are looking to change the foundation for children, to stop them being drawn into criminal exploitation. And, you know, creating innovation within this town with the small amount of money we have within this partnership. So what I am suggesting, because like I say, I could be here next year and talk about first time entrants and there'd still be reductions. But within those first time entrants, if these kids are convicted, there'll be 6 murderers. So it doesn't give you anything. It doesn't give me anything, really. It doesn't give us the ability to deep dive into this. So I'm looking at the reduction in the numbers of children we see referred into MAGPAN already entrenched in criminal exploitation, because what that gives us is it gives us the number of children that are coming in where actually perhaps we could have picked up earlier. They could have been picked up at some point and teachable, reachable moments. Reduction in the rates of children convicted for serious violence in the youth justice statutory cohort. So that means the young people that we're already working with within this partnership don't go on to then commit serious violence. Numbers of children exiting MAGPAN. And we have had a number this year, because if a child exits MAGPAN, it's a massive success. Because to be taken on in MAGPAN, there has to be parallel intelligence that that young person is either part of a mapped gang in Luton or they're heavily associated with someone that is involved. So each month that they're reviewed, they're engaging with intervention and there's no intelligence. And what I mean by intelligence is every single one of us puts in multi-agency intel forms almost on a daily basis. Certainly my service does. And if there's no corroborating intelligence, then that young person, you know, risk is lower and they exit MAGPAN. So that tells us something as a partnership. And then reductions in first time entrants, because that's really, really key. You know, we're good at it, but it's also, you know, I look at that because underpinning that is triage and diversion. But I don't like using that terminology. I prefer to say just stopping our kids offending, you know, and we stop our kids offending by providing opportunities to inspire them so they aspire to succeed in Luton. So I'm creating, I think, a rod for my own back with the change of this, because it's a lot more and it's very intrusive and it's very deep dive. But I think it's the kind of things that we need to see as a partnership, but as what we need to see in terms of scrutiny as well. Thank you.
Eric, where do you want to go next? I don't mind. What do members want to do? Do you want to pick up the points that we've got to so far, or do you want to continue with the themes and then come back to the whole area at the end?
It's best to come in, that's all.
Well, we have the separate papers that were all on the themes, which came through after the other papers. What we're doing now is to go through those because they all relate through to the overall plan for the next period of 4 years. So the question is do you want to deal with questions on individual themes as we go along, or do you want to wait until we've gone through all of the themes?
I think if we go through all of the themes is probably best. Otherwise, we'll get stuck with lots of questions and may not even get to go through all the themes, and then we'll run out of time again like last time.
We'll go through the themes if we can try and keep them shorter if we can.
Okay, thank you. So the theme going forward for this item has changed slightly. So I think previously it was bundled up in terms of drug and alcohol, violence against women and girls, and mental health all combined. So we've now split it into two themes overall, with public health as the lead for two. So one of them is domestic abuse and on-street sexual exploitation, grouped together now as a new theme. And as with all of these, this is really a partnership approach. Domestic abuse is really led from the public health team. We have a domestic abuse strategy and a domestic abuse partnership board that has been meeting and driving delivery of the strategy for the last 2 years. We've got a domestic abuse grant that has the oversight of, and that's due to be refreshed this year. So we're just conducting a data analysis piece, population needs assessment, to understand impact and where the needs still are, and that strategy will be refreshed this year. At the moment, we have these 4 priority areas as part of the strategy. So prevention and early help, partnership working, provision of services, and improvement and protection. And it's likely that the new strategy will be along similar themes, but we are currently doing that review now. So that will come back as this progresses through as updates as how that's working and the impact that's having. If you go on to the next slide. Please. And so bundled up within the same theme, but it's very much a discrete piece of work, although there are clear overlaps and interdependencies, is the on-street sex exploitation work. So this is very much a partnership piece of work with the police, and Tom Steen, who we've already mentioned, is the co-chair and co-lead, working with Nicola in my team in public health to drive this work forwards. So it's very much focused on Hightown currently, because that's where we know that there is a problem at the moment with on-street sex work. And we are developing a strategic approach, working in partnership with voluntary sector across the council, drug and alcohol services, NHS and other partners, to work through a strategic approach to that challenge at the moment. So we're currently working up the strategy, but there has been a number of partnership meetings, some listening events with the sex workers themselves and with the community, and developing actions. So there will be 6 strategic objectives with a lead for each to develop the specific actions around those objectives. So they're on the slide here and in your pack. So the strategic objectives are around identifying the problem, developing routes out for women who are at the moment working on the street with sex work, tackling the demand, so that multi-agency approach to tackling those who exploit people, prevention and early intervention, community intelligence, so as I mentioned, engaging with the affected communities, talking and understanding and responding to their needs, keeping them informed, listening to concerns, and then disruption, so those working in frontline roles, identifying on-street sex exploitation and proactively working to disrupt those offending and safeguarding individuals. So it's really moved forward in the last 6 months, and really exciting piece of work, and hopefully we'll start to see some real impacts soon. I think that's it for that theme. And then the next theme, which is also public health leading currently in terms of reporting back here, but again, really a partnership approach. And as Robin mentioned earlier, this is really underpins the 10-year drug strategy. And there are 3 pillars to the 10-year drug strategy that we are responding to locally across Bedfordshire, and really targeting in Luton our work. And so public health are reporting back as the lead here, but it really is a key partnership piece of work with the police as well. So there's 3 pillars to the national drug strategy. pillar one is really what we were talking about before around where the police are leading around breaking the drug supply chain. Pillar two is around the treatment and recovery system and services. So we have a provider here, Resolutions, and we are working with getting more people into the service, outreach, improving referral pathways, training across other organisations to make sure people know how to raise the issues and refer people as they need it, linking with the prisons, linking with drug testing on arrest and referrals into service. So all of that piece is led by public health. And then pillar three is around achieving a generational shift. So looking at that prevention approach, working with schools, and that's a partnership approach that we're developing the actions on that now. And then just lastly, within this theme, just on the drug and alcohol and mental health. So we are refreshing our mental health strategy. So we're doing lots of work around mental health. We've got a new all age strategy, which is just about to go out to consultation. But there's obviously very clear interlinks with the drug and alcohol treatment, dual diagnosis and various other interrelated bits. So that will be coming through as it progresses as well. Thank you.
Where next then, Mary?
Me again. So I stood before you this time last year and said, I think the key to a lot of the issues in this town is the town centre. It seemed to be the number one hotspot for crimes, of neighbourhood crime, of drug crime, of violence, serious violence, knife crime, and so I set about tackling that. We gave rise to Operation Metal, which was an overarching theme for it. And again, I suppose to touch on that point, we've already said that we're busier and we have more challenges than we have resources. And so my theory was that if we could focus, and there are academic theories around this, around the concentration, laws of concentration of crime. And if we can focus on that, we can get some quick wins, then that will roll out and have an impact on the rest of our neighbourhoods around the town. And we can then have more time to focus on the crimes around the rest of our town as well, because we'll have more time and space to do it with. And I think because the key to our town, the heart of our town, is our town centre, it's also the key to the 2040 vision in that we want a prosperous and thriving town, and businesses will want to invest and people want to come to our town centre if it's in good shape. So that said, the aims of Operation Metal were to sustainably, and I use that word quite specifically, we need a sustainable reduction. The surge of operations and so forth needs coordinating to make an overall gain that we can maintain, and the additional 4 officers that should be coming this year will be part of that sustainability. And that's to reduce the threat, harm and risk to everybody living and working in the town centre, and reduce demand on the police and our partners in that area, obviously focusing on all systems. And when I say that, so we've had, the community team out tackling low-level crime, tackling the sort of ASB and so forth. We're working with Health for the Town Centre Partnership Board around homelessness and unpicking that very wicked problem that we have there. We've had plainclothes officers out on patrols, taking out the drug lines, and there's some significant success where I think we've seized something in the region of £250,000 worth of drug money. We've taken about £150,000 worth of drugs off the street. This is in the last 6 months. And we've reduced crime by about 200 offences in that time period, which is no mean feat. And it's meant that the town is a better place to be. Anecdotally, people are coming up to us and telling us that it's a better place to be. Even the town centre drug users are coming up to our officers and saying, we can't buy drugs in the town anymore. It's really difficult to buy drugs in the town because our dealers are all gone, which is a real sign of success. My response to my officers was to put them in the back of your Panda then and drive them to the drug and alcohol services units and get them while we have a moment of clarity on a programme and get them off the streets and off the drugs. So it's starting to turn, and so the plan for the next 4 years is really to develop and ingrain that in everything we do. Just to give you one of the other benefits of that is that bottom point as Operation Mercury Blade, which was a knife crime initiative I launched in late January, around the town centre hotspot. We had the number 1 hotspot for the county in the town centre for knife crime and serious violence. It ran throughout February for 4 weeks. It was quite intensive, a lot of effort, but we've got a blueprint now, so the next one will be easier. But actually what we experienced there was a reduction in serious violence of 30% in that period of time. And then that was compared to the same period the previous year. And then we used Bedford Town Centre as a control area. So this is a really scientific way of looking at this. And actually we reduced violence with injury in that period as well by over 50% compared to that time period. So there's some real successes there that we can keep building on, and that is what we hope to do with that strand, is keep building on targeting those themes, targeting the serious and organised crime, the drug lines, and those who prey on our families and our friends and our children in the town centre.
Antisocial behaviour?
Hi, good evening. I think it's important to really reinforce that Luton has got a really strong partnership platform, and in particular in relation to the area that our theme is on, around the areas of tackling priority issues which matter to communities. And as you can see from the images, they clearly illustrate that partnership working. In terms of antisocial behaviour, we will be looking at continuing to prioritise the management of both victims, perpetrators of ASB. We're looking at the renewal of the town centre PSPO for a further 3 years, continuing to work across the partnership to ensure that the right resources for victims are available, as well as continuing to facilitate ASB case reviews on behalf of communities and consider justice outcomes for victims. The area work around enviro crime, we will have a strong focus on the war on waste, which you will be aware has been launched, and take positive action against those who we identify who think it's acceptable to litter and fly tip in our town, which clearly it's not. We will evaluate and continue to work with our observable enforcement contractor, which is in its pilot period still, which is wise, and consider further options around the work that they do going forward. Look at our communication methods and where we can improve those methods to deliver key campaign messages, and focus on areas where vehicle nuisance takes place, including dealing with vehicle idling, parking hotspots, and safety around schools. And to save time, I'll stop there.
Hello, hi. As Marek had said, and also just looking at what David said, that the roots of the change for us has come in our past, because as you're all aware, that Luton has been an area that's been funded around extremism for at least since 2007, and I've been here since 2009. So in terms of as we move forward, one of our big issues is that how do we look at addressing some of the trends and themes that we're seeing within the extremism picture that we have, which in a sense is assessed for us, but also looking at how we can improve our understanding of hate crime and get back to a place where we can see that there are clear trends in the work that myself and my team do around the prevent work that suggests that there is quite a considerable amount of trending and unknown activity that clearly sits within that hate crime space. It is one of the only kind of dual themes, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done. I think from our point of view, we do have a strong sense of what drives some of the extremist activity in the town, but equally, in some of our dialogues with communities that we do have, we're also seeing a lot of unreported hate crime coming through. And in fact, fairly recently, we had a session with 160 parents, children, young people, who, whilst they were expressing their concerns about online activity, they're also saying about how hate crime for them is a real lived experience. Now, in a sense, from where we're looking at it, we are going to continue to build on the work that we've done around extremism for the last 15 years in my tenure anyway. But more importantly, I think what it allows us to do is have that broader engagement with communities around what they're experiencing around hate crime in particular. And I know, Alex, you might want to chip in on that in terms of where things have been and where they're going. But our confidence is that not only in terms of the extremist narratives that we're seeing, we're also seeing that a lot of communities do want to talk about hate crime. And I know Dave's benefited from the fact that communities also want to talk about what concerns them as young people around knife violence, the town centre. So they all do meld into one place. But I think that I would like to see us build on where we are around our extremism picture. How does that support the development of more improved confidence in hate crime reporting? But equally, it allows us to then target and focus our work more clearly when we're looking at the funded work that we have. So in terms of the kind of the early stage development, there is going to be a lot of work with, I think, Alex or his counterpart to address a kind of a roadmap to look at how do we pull those strands together and make them make sense, but also building on absolutely things that we recognised as have been supportive and also have been recognised internationally as good practice in terms of our extremism narratives and how we've been, I suppose, quite brave about how we take a line as to what a Luton model looks like. So moving forward, I think that we'll see a lot more clarity and understanding of the data that I know we have access to, but we haven't always been able to use to allow us to focus more readily when we are looking at some of the extremist pictures that are not just in Luton. It's also one of our biggest issues is the online space, and a lot of the hate crime activity that we're seeing reported to us is very much in that online world. So again, I think it's just a matter of us tightening that theme up, bringing them together, and then in a sense exploring what our local pathways can be to support not only our targeted work, but also the work that the police do. And I know, Gemma, in your past life, you're there to support us around our understanding of hate crime more readily. But happy to take questions on that at a later point.
And then what I think is the final one of reducing reoffending.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm passing on apologies from our theme lead, Doug Charlton, who's the regional head of probation. He has an away day with his whole team over the last 2 days, so he very much wanted to be there, and I will pass on some comments from him in a second. But he asked me just to zip through these slides. If we could go to the next one, please. And I think what's important to note in this is the extent of partnership, commitment and working that is coming through from his theme and his perspective on the work of the CSP here. I think that's a significant shift for our reoffending theme, because as colleagues will remember, and Chair will concur, we had very little engagement from the probation service, and it's an absolutely critical service because it's part of that criminal justice system whereby people can exit criminal pathways if given the right support. And it's a key part of the jigsaw. So to have the service now working alongside us and picking up on issues around young people and integrated offender management, around working on partnerships with community organisations in the town, to look at joint risk assessments around the serious organised crime picture in Luton, and build relationships with DWP as well, and looking at the positive opportunities around training opportunity, and last but not least, an offer to our communities and our councillors indeed around unpaid work, and how we can use that in neighbourhood improvement to help with reassurance in communities about justice and the positive pathways out of it. So I think there's a really positive message coming out of this theme particularly, and just to sort of finish on that positivity, I'll read the comments from Doug himself, which he asked to be brought to the committee. So he says, across the reducing reoffending agenda, there has been a lack of joined up approaches and accountability, which has resulted in unclear deliverables. We are reviewing this at the county-wide Reducing Reoffending Board, which Doug, chairs, so that we can assess what works and where we need to build resilience in the system. In the 2024-28 plan that Luton has developed, it puts the town ahead of the game, as it has been designed to capture and respond to themes that impact on the 8 key areas. By appointing leads such as myself, it introduces levels of accountability across the services so that we can deliver improvements and respond to the public perceptions. With shrinking resources across the system, and most acutely in local authorities, it is vital to delivery that we all pull together in the same direction. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, long haul to get here, but let's start picking up the essence of what we're trying to get from the committee this evening is any inputs which you have to the general theme. I know it's very wide ranging, so off we go. Who wants to start me off?
To be clear, Chair, we're still coming back to the other agenda items in more depth, are we? We're not going to do that.
We're not going to go through all of the, well, you say the individual, the theme,
8.1, 8.8.
the theme papers.
Yes.
I mean, we have just gone through the theme papers in summary.
But there are issues that have come up in some of those papers that are not addressed fully in the themes.
Well, that's absolutely fine. In which case, please bring those up now, because it's all relevant going forward on the new plan.
Sorry. I wanted to take one step back, if you could, just very briefly, probably aimed at Robin. I think he's gone, but Adam maybe. When we're looking at the vision for Luton, and it talks about Luton to be a place where everyone can thrive and and nobody lives in poverty, or something roughly to that effect. The thing that's missing from that is safety. And I'm wondering whether we ought to insert, because safety is a key part, I'm wondering whether we ought to insert that. So Luton to be a place where everyone can thrive in safety and where no one lives in poverty. I just think that's something that we probably haven't addressed. And probably before I start on my main questions.
I can pick up on that quickly, Chair, if that's okay. I mean, I think the outcomes wheel Mark alluded to, you remember seeing the big wheel in there. I think it is picked up. It is part of the themes, you know, and it is addressed as part of the outcomes that relate to 2040. Obviously, if we pick on something explicitly, one of the theme areas, there'll probably be other things that we'd want to cover in that as well. Potentially, you get into education, health, all sorts of aspects that sit under 2040. But I think it's something we're not going to resolve here in terms of a question, if I'm being honest. So I think we probably need to take it away and come back to you, because obviously 2040 is much broader than just the safety aspect. So it's probably not something we'd want to get into detail. But what I would say is we can recirculate, and if you haven't looked at the outcomes piece that we're working on in terms of the roadmaps 2040, all of the different outcomes we're looking at that sit underneath 2040, and that safety part of it and how it works and cross-cuts across the piece, then very happy to talk offline with councillors about, you know, how we might bring that more relevantly forward and more obvious, if that makes sense at all.
Okay, thank you. Chair, can I start my first main question? Actually, it's to the superintendent, if I may. I'm sorry about that, but I wonder whether we've looked, and we've obviously made very good progress. And there's two aspects I want to raise. First is, have we looked at any of the strategies that have been used in Glasgow, whereby that they have managed to, be over a long period of time, to really tackle knife crime. Some of the things that they looked at, probably because of the difference in the legal system in Scotland, we couldn't do. But for example, when they identify people that could be potential potentially carrying knives, you know, they've called them into the sheriff's office, and they've had big posters of them, you know, pictures on the walls, and they've made it very clear. They've said, you know, to you, if you carry a knife, we will get you. You'll go to prison, as well as your gang members. And in some ways they've also used it not just as a crime per se, but they treated it more as a health issue, which is something that perhaps that we could perhaps pick up. not just in Luton, but probably more nationally, and learn from the Scots, which we don't normally do necessarily. I shouldn't say that. My father was anyway. Yeah. Perhaps some thoughts on that?
In short, yes. So I was at a problem-solving conference the last 2 days where I presented around the Operation Mercury Blade. That was with academics. It was 20 forces from England and Wales where they presented a problem-solving thing. There was a lot of work around knife crime, so a lot of cross-pollination of ideas. And we do something similar. So we have identified and I'll take you through it if you have time after or another time. I'm happy to sit with you. But we have quite a comprehensive prevention plan around drugs, around knife crime, and actually Pillar 3 that was mentioned earlier on. I'm going to pick up and lead going forwards with that around drug crime. But with the knife crime, one of those things will be we've identified habitual knife carriers and the top 10 most commonly identified one, and we're disrupting activity. We're knocking on their door, saying we're watching you. We know you're out and about. If we see you in the town centre, if we see you out and about on the streets, we'll be looking for you. And where powers permit, we'll be searching you and going through your pockets. So there is a drive and focus among many other elements of that. Sorry, Sally's got a point there.
Thank you. I just wanted to come in on that just because you mentioned using that health approach for knife crime. So it's really interesting that the sort of using a public health approach is it's said a lot, but it's actually used without kind of people realizing that it's become quite the normal way of addressing things now. And what it really means, I think, is about understanding the problem. So using that needs assessment approach, so looking at the population data, understanding what the facts and figures say, what the evidence base says, so doing that proper review of the problem. And then it's about partnership approach, and then it's about making sure that you're thinking about prevention in part of that as well. And the knife crime example is exactly what we've been doing. So there's really good identifying the problem, understanding the evidence base, coming together as partnerships, identifying solutions together as partners, thinking about prevention, and then all the other strands. And similarly with the on-street sex work, it's a similar approach about understanding the problem, thinking about those multifaceted approaches. Gambling, you could say we're doing we haven't talked about it here, but that public health approach, that's what it means really. And I think we are doing that here.
Marek, first, please.
Thank you. And just to back up Sally's point, and thank you, Councillor, really, really good point. I'm glad you made it, because we put it very explicitly at the front of the plan as something that we were working to as a system, as a partnership. So on page 76 of your papers in the draft plan, it talks about the World Health Organization public health approach, focused on a defined population, done with and for communities, focused on generating long-term as well as short-term solutions, data and evidence being critical, and a focus on inequality as well. So all of those key principles that Sally's outlined and that we've talked about today are right, as a reminder for us to frame our work. And as you said, our response to knife crime has been using those very clear principles and working in a very focused way around them.
I'll come back to you in just a second. Councillor Mood.
Just two very quick points, probably touches across different themes, but one of the things that, I don't know, we discussed at the last knife crime summit, not the most recent one, was, I'm sure you've seen the direct line between school exclusions and prison. Are you working with pupil referral units as well? Because the young children who are excluded from school are most at risk of exploitation and getting caught up in crime. So, I mean, are you kind of working with the schools and the data on that? Because I think that's really important. They did it in London, and it seems to have made some difference. And secondly, just as an academic kind of interest of mine, but 50% of Britain's prison population is functionally illiterate. And, a lot of people, when they come out of prison, struggle. A lot of learning difficulties, can't write a CV. And one of the reasons we've got the highest reoffending rate in Europe is because the short-term prison sentences that that are routinely given, offenders don't have much chance of rehabilitation, because rehabilitation is as important as kind of doing the time for the crime. So, are you kind of working with organisations that are looking to tackle those underlying root causes of functional illiteracy, helping re-engage offenders back into employment opportunities?
No, I was just going to say, I was going to roll that grenade across the table to you. Do you want to do it?
Yeah, I mean, as a youth partnership service, yeah, I sit within the Children, Families and Education department, which means I sit on the same senior management team with colleagues from education. We work with all the alternative learning provisions in terms of young people. We work in terms of keeping young people included in schools as well. So working towards, if there has to be an exclusion, making that a temporary exclusion where that young person can receive specialist input into it. Our new director for education, Paul Wagstaff, has got plans for strategies in terms of education, which are really exciting and really innovative. Looking at task force, some of the to keep young people in schools. Some of the innovations we're looking at in terms of us and the police, again, is about minimising exclusion because you're absolutely right. One of the consistent themes across all of the children that get involved in offending, let alone serious violence and custody, there's always that suffered but exclusion in an alternative learning provisions that's not appropriate to their learning. But also touching on the illiteracy, I would say 99.9% of the young people that get involved in this, particularly later on when they're 15, 16, 17, have undiagnosed SEND issues or undiagnosed speech and language and communication issues. So it's really, really key. Part of our service now, we're trialing a pilot with an educational psychologist to try and target those kind of issues early. We've got a speech and language therapist that joined us in January as well. The issue, it's not going to be solved overnight because, when you look at the great custody rates for young people in Luton, so children in Luton, the rates for 18, 19, 20 and 21-year-olds are astonishing, appalling, and, disproportionate in terms of Black, Asian, minority, ethnic young adults, but also care leavers as well. And that's where that cycle of entrenched kind of behaviour starts. And that's where the cost of late intervention comes and what we see in our town centres. So, absolutely.
Our new officer.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a really good question. We actually had a representative from Bedford Prison at our Knife Crime Summit this week, and Robin has kindly put me in touch with him. So that's something that I'll address with him and see if we can do any joint up working to address that. It's a really good question. Thank you.
Councillor Abbas.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions, and I think one of the things, the themes that I was looking at, the priorities you've got, and given what we were talking about earlier about a lack of confidence, I don't know whether there should be something around restoring confidence within the public. That's something maybe we all need to work on, and I didn't see anything there because, as the superintendent said, crime's actually falling, but people aren't believing us. So we've got to restore that confidence. So I don't know whether we could add something along those lines.
Thank you, Councillor. You're right. It's not a specific theme, but it is what we've identified cross-cutting priorities in the strategy, which include trust, the need to deepen trust and build understanding with our community, and also perception. The perception of the whole partnership, the criminal justice system, and how we need to bring forward a positive communication and dialogue with our residents around what isn't working, we know, but what is working, and the examples that we have touched on in the room where we can show stories of positive change and where matters have been addressed really well, and give confidence then to communities that things are working and so on. So there is a positive spiral of not taking a deficit approach that we want to promote. That's part of what the Social Justice Unit does in all its work and with communities, and we would want the partnership to be doing that as well. So on page 76, we set that out in the strategy as cross-cutting priorities, and I think that's where we'll be picking up that work with our partners, with our communities, with councillors indeed. Thank you.
Second, Councillor Stephen.
I've just got a couple of questions. First of all, to yourself, Superintendent, these figures that we've got on pages 23 and 24, are they just numbers in terms of what's been reported, or is that what's been actually gone through CPS or prosecuted? So I'm looking at the slightly earlier on page 23, 24.
The figures come from Beds Police, but they come via our analyst, and they are reported crime, as far as I understand. Yeah.
Okay. All right then. Secondly, what I wanted to understand was, and this goes back to page 44. On page 44, and this is part of an earlier report. What I'm looking at is point number 12. So where you are talking about sort of developing services, looking at what's being excluded, how are you identifying those students in year 6? So I guess that's partly yourself and partly the other department. So in terms of year 6 students, how are you identifying those students who are struggling to transition?
You speak to any head teacher who are going to receive those year 6s coming into Key Stage 3, they will say to you colloquially that they know what children are going to fail based on their paperwork. Because when they look at their ability, their attainment, their attendance, and their responses to authority. So that was the benchmark that we first applied, and that identified over 580 kids. Now, in our service, the success around reducing custody started with something that we initiated back in 2017 called the likelihood of custody scrutiny. And all we did was looked at a study of kids that had experienced custody in the previous 5 years and looked at all the factors of commonality. And, I mean, this wasn't kind of, hugely academic, but it was really simple things like the numbers of referrals to social care, exclusions, antisocial behaviour, entry into the criminal justice service. And what we did is we applied that formula, if you like, to every single young person that we had entering our service in statutory youth justice. And if there was a likelihood of custody, then we would put additional resources into that and peer supervision. And so what we then did with those kids that we identified is we then applied our formula there. And, again, it was still in the hundreds, but because this is an 3-year initiative being paid for out of the youth justice contingency, we had to get it. I wanted it down to a cohort of 18 kids. We eventually took 24 with the thought that actually throughout the year we'd have some drop-offs. Every single case is still open. So the ones that consented, we're actually closing them this month. So that's the first cohort that we've been working with since the 4th of September 2022. They're all still in because they've made that transition because, of course, we've got cohort 2 now. And they're still all in school. So we're doing, we've got someone joining us from the university this month to do an evaluation across that. But it was based on kind of formulaic based on what the school looks for in a young person's behaviour, and then what we look for in terms of those drivers for exploitation and offending. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that does. Thank you. Just going back to what Councillor Bassett Mahmood was talking about when we are looking at educating those that are already in prison to bring them to a standard where they can integrate into society. From me looking at it from my own point of view as a teaching professional, it is harder to recruit. First of all, recruiting good teachers is a really tough job. Secondly, within a prison, that challenge becomes harder. So how will you what will you do to recruit those people, and what can you offer them? Because at the end of the day, they're going to look at, first of all, safety being one of those things. But at the same time, they're going to look for personal and professional growth. So what is it that you're going to offer those professionals for them to, first of all, come into such an environment that they might perceive as being a hostile environment in the first place?
I mean, thankfully, Councillor, I don't have to recruit to prisons education, because you're absolutely right. Not just in terms of education, but just in terms of recruitment. Gemma was talking about the governor from Bedford Prison at the knife crime event, and I was speaking to him, and staffing's a nightmare. In terms of young people when they go in custody, I mean, thankfully, even though we've got 6 young people remanded in custody for murder at the moment, sentenced to custody, we've only had 1 young person in the last 2 years, which for a town like Luton is beyond bucking the trend. When a young person goes into custody, we have a co-located worker through, and one of my colleagues asking about working with alternative learning provisions, the Avenue Centre for Education have a worker that's co-located within my service. They ensure that education continues inside. Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I don't think that education, when it's delivered inside, is anywhere close to what that education would be delivered on the outside. But at least we've got someone who is advocating for that. When that young person gets released, we have something called a resettlement panel. So it's usually a month before the young person's released. Like I say, we used to do it regularly pre 2017, and it's kind of sort of rare now, where education is set up already for that young person. So when that young person comes out, they come out on Friday, they start in the education on Monday, because if there's any kind of gap, that young person falls right back into. But massively challenging. There's a bigger conversation that's to be had around transition, because what I'm seeking to do, we've got supported transitions at one end. So that's where we're trying to identify those kids early enough so they're not criminally exploited. But I want our service in Luton to develop into working with 18-year-olds in a prevention space, because I've identified for our criminal justice board that there is a massive cliff edge. The piece of work I did for the criminal justice board looked at the 18, 19, 20-year-old prison population for Luton between April and July, so 4 months. 38 were in prison, all for violent offences, and they will go on to continue to commit violent offences and be these repeat offenders. So massive area.
All right.
Just to pick up on Dave's point, I know that you work closely with Doug on the reoffending boards as well, and that transition from early young people, early adulthood and onwards is critical. And I know you saw his overview of the plan. That's something he will want to focus on. But I can, as he's not here tonight, and I'm not an expert in it, but I could take a written question back and get back to you on some of that from him. I think he'd be very glad to respond, and also with our colleague at the prison that we've just made contact with. So we'll follow that through for you. Thank you.
Just one last point, if I may. Just to go back a little bit on what you said earlier, Marek, when you were talking on behalf of the colleague that can't be here today. And I'm just picking up bits and pieces from the room. So what I'm hearing a lot of is that there is a lack of joined up work, and there is I'm not going to say a breakdown in communication, but there isn't as robust communication between the relevant departments as there perhaps could be. And I think that is quite crucial if we are going to make what we've got planned here work. And it saddens me a little bit, because this is what we've heard since Victoria Cleanbay's case, when Monroe did his reports, that there is a continuous lack of joined up effort and communication between the various functions within councils, within society as a whole. So I do hope that we can address some of these issues and perhaps communicate better, because we are all working towards a better future for Luton in terms of 2040 vision. So thank you.
Councillor Bass.
Thank you, Chair. I was just gonna ask a question about, is this a strategy or a plan? The reason I'm asking that, because the question going through my mind is, this is about 4 years. What resource are we allocating to all of this? And a lot of the KPIs talk about reduction. We're not quantifying what reduction is. I mean, if you get 2 less knife crimes, that's a reduction. And what are we trying to do? So I'm not sure. As a strategy, I'm comfortable with it. And having something about restoring public confidence in all of this included in there, I'd feel comfortable as a strategy for 4 years. But as a delivery plan, I'm not so sure, because about resources being assigned to this. We already talked about resourcing is one of the big issues. It's all right, great having this great plan and talking very ambitiously, but if we can't quantify what we're going to achieve with it, how's that going to get confidence in the public? So I just wonder.
Before you reply, there was a request to come in. Yes.
So I was going to answer Councillor Begum's question. Would you like me to say that now, or do you want Marek to answer that most recent question? So, Councillor Begum, were you referring to the probation service not engaging? Is that who you meant when you just said about Marek's comment?
Just in general, there seems to be a lack of communication. I went to, for example, when I went on the training for the social workers, I got to see what they were kind of looking at. There is not every social worker, first of all, follows the same, and I'm to email still, sorry about the delay. But yeah, I mean, when we do genograms, everyone's got their own version of genograms. Textbooks wise, we know what we are doing in terms of how we are doing genograms and how we are identifying the difficult relationships and what's happening in relationships. It just seems that I understand that there is a lot of pressure on all of our officers, and I understand that everyone's got sort of targets that they've got to work towards. There's a lot of report writing, there's a lot of bureaucracy. But just to save on a bit of time, I don't think we can cut corners, especially when when we're looking at the roles of social workers. And this is why I think there needs to be a lot more clear communication between the different professionals of what works for them, what can they come up with new, and what are the ways that they can go forward. And in terms of each department talking to each other, because even in that one little room of all the different sort of social workers that I encountered, there was also a lady from the DFE. It just didn't sound, or for me anyway, it just didn't sound right that everyone's got a different version that they're following, and it should be uniform, in my opinion, especially when we are talking about young people, because we know that a lot of these people that do offend have suffered from trauma in some sense or other, or have had dealings with child protection in some way or other. And these are, in my opinion, the roots of what causes some of these things that we see in terms of young people's behaviours and why they behave the way that they do. But again, that's me from a theoretical perspective. Obviously, it's different on the ground.
Marek, you asked to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for that. I think the two questions are sort of related. So, we're doing a lot of work in the Council 2040 to actually reduce the number of strategies that we have, because 2040 is the strategy, and that overview of how the work for the town, for our community, is really crucial. And we've tried to explain how the plan we set out for the next 4 years is anchored in that approach. And I think to achieve that, collaboration is absolutely key and central. And so we do need a certain amount of strategic thinking for the Community Safety Partnership to be able to deliver on what is, you're right, a very ambitious delivery plan. I wouldn't shrink from that. But I think the problems that we're facing demand that. We have to be ambitious because people are suffering. People are worried. People are dying. So I think that's why we've shaped it as we have. We need a certain amount of strategic thinking and common themes across these very diverse areas of work to knit it together and link it back to the overall 2040 strategy. So that's how I would say we're positioning the plan. In terms of delivery, you're quite right. We've come to you at a very early stage, I think, in our thinking on this, and quite honestly and openly, very happily to have that conversation about what we are trying to achieve, the way we're setting it out, what the targets and outcomes are that we're starting to focus in. And I think you'll see in the theme report the detail of it and the presentations that theme leads are at different stages of focus and priority around what they're going to be working on and how that's going to be expressed in the final plan. We're going to do some work over the next few weeks and months to align that, to rationalise it, to summarise it, and also I think test it around the resources question, because we do want it to be feasible. We do want it to be realisable, realistic. But I think a lot of it in there is the work that theme leads are currently doing, and they are in charge of their areas. That's the way we're working. They're delegated authorities. So if Dave tells me this is what I'm going to be doing with my service plan over the next 4 years, that's great. I believe him, and I know that he'll be working with Dheeraj and all of his partners, because he's doing it on behalf of a partnership himself, to ensure that he has as much of the resources as possible to deliver on that agenda. And I think the same would be true for all of our theme leads in that respect. I think there's probably one other point to mention, that we're doing this work in the context of an election for the PCC's office in May. And we're very aware that we need to revisit it in the context of that, because the PCC's office is a critical partner, particularly around resourcing and the alignment of resources for the future. And there has been some really helpful work that has been kicked off as a result of our knife crime collaboration, in fact, around joint commissioning. It's something that Adam, myself and Robin have wanted to achieve for some time, but I think there's a new appetite to review commissioning in the county from a number of points of views: duplication, effective use of resources, but also proportionality. And we know that Luton has a disproportionate burden when it comes to community safety issues and pressures on our population. And we know that that needs to be reflected in future resourcing plans. And that's something we will certainly be taking back with this plan to a conversation with the PCC after the election, in terms of what needs to happen going forward to mobilise and deliver.
Just let the Deputy Commissioner come back in, then I want to go on back to Councillor Stevens, as I promised.
Thank you, Chairman. It just alludes back to your comments about collaborative working. There is a very large piece of work going on at the moment, being led by the Office of the OPCC, which is looking at the commissioning across all of the partners within on a pan-Bedfordshire basis. We do know there are some groups that are getting commissioned 3 times for the same piece of work, which is not good use of resources, not good use of public money. And within all of that, we've also got areas where things are falling through the gaps. So there is a piece of work going on at the moment, members, to look at commissioning, look at where the unmet need is, okay, and then we're bringing in a process to actually see if we can improve the commissioning in all those areas. And I think that's really important in terms of us getting best value for the public, etc. And then coming back to Councillor Abbas's comments in terms of key performance, I agree. Okay, but I would be very careful about putting numbers against that, because if you said, well, we want to see a reduction of 40% and you hit 39%, is that a failure? So it's about making sure are we getting reductions in the right place? And bear in mind, sometimes actually seeing an increase where you've got increased reporting or increased referrals is a success. So it's about making sure we've got the right measurements there, Chairman. Thank you.
Back to Councillor Stevens.
Chair, I would like to take us back to the survey that was carried out, pages 46 to 48, which looks at it looks at the whole issue. 350 young people were surveyed, not a particularly wide survey, I would have to say, but nevertheless useful. And it looked at what are the main things that make young people get into the way of crime. There are some very useful results that come from that. Not always complete, because I think it's things like need to belong and the fear of not belonging are 2 aspects of it. But I think there is some useful work that could be done there, because I think on the previous page, on page 47, it looked at what do you think about what there is for young people to do in the community? What else do you think could help them stay out of trouble? You've got there's an opportunity here for cross fertilizing the questions, if you like. And I think it would be ideal to go back to have a more in-depth, if it hasn't done already, to have a more in-depth focus group looking at these issues and seeing if it can draw out some more in-depth information. Because just as they are at the moment, I say this with my former marketing academic hat on, it's useful, but it's not useful enough. Because I think there are sections about, what some people get involved in selling drugs and carrying knives. What do you think? The parents or God? I mean, there's more issues that could be brought out here. It doesn't cover, for example, the fact that school teachers could play a role in identifying opportunities and passing those off to the parents. The opportunities of bringing parents in with the children to discuss the opportunities of actually doing some training with parents, so there's lots of themes in here, and I think it was a very useful, I don't know who did it, but it was a very, you did it, well done. It's a very useful survey, and I think that, if you haven't done it, it'd be really good to take it further and to do the focus groups on that to see what more you can draw out of it.
So
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I mean the context in when that was completed, and significantly as well, 350 plus is huge, because we were talking to young people that are out on the street selling drugs as well. So getting the views of young people that you don't normally get the views of. That was done as a result of the community meetings we were having with the 4 knife incidents in September. Obviously, lots of the communities were anxious, scared, frightened, angry, pointing things at the council and the police. And we were listening to a lot of what adults were saying and not what kids were saying. So what we did very, very, very quickly and efficiently with all our community partners was did this to hear what kids were saying. Brought those results to the event in November. But it's about the voice of the child. And I think what I'm hearing from you is everything that we are driving towards. So we coordinate the youth council as well. So a group of young people who, are part of the leadership program with our elected members. They hold their own committees as well. The plans for it would be the 3rd iteration of the youth council, because they only sit for 2 years, is to create a youth parliament in Luton. So take all of the chairs of the school councils and the Children in Care Council and the Youth Council. So then you are listening to a voice, and you have got a voice of thousands of kids to do it. So in terms of focus groups, they happen week in and week out. We consult with children about stop and search. We put focus groups together. So that consultation was done very specifically because, do you know what? I think we'd had enough of listening to what the adults were saying that kids needed and we needed. So we asked very succinct, open questions to get the views from kids. But I totally agree with you. The plans to expand that youth voice are there.
Move on to a different topic. Right, I'm going to move on. It was actually one of the papers, but I know it was touched upon, and it was that of resolution, and looking at the issue of drugs and what can be done, what is being done about it. I'm going to find a page. Firstly, it didn't pick up. It picked up, obviously, the issue of opiates, non-opiates. It didn't pick up the growing issue of.
Sorry, Councillor, did you have a page number you referred to?
I do apologise. Sorry, I was picking it up off the 8.6. It was paper 8.6. I'm sorry, but it was in the theme as well. So
page number in the papers.
Sorry. It's 8.6 page 1. It was what I said because it was an agenda item. 8.
These were papers that came separately afterwards.
Okay, I think we're probably talking to your papers, Sally. Yeah, great, thank you. Good.
I mean, there is also the issue of amphetamines, which is growing dramatically in Luton, and one of the problems that I see from this paper is that yes, we've tackled quite a lot, but as with social workers, there's a huge turnover of staff. And that's something that we've got to, we have to deal with. The other thing is there is the issue of the fact that if we want somebody to go to, a clinic to try to solve I think we've only got about 15 places in Luton, and we would tend in any way, if we wanted somebody to be cleaned. We would tend to send them outside of the county, because obviously if we sent them within county, then they're going to be near to their drug dealers. So I know that is a big issue, I think, going forward. So yes, we have got opportunities. We are trying to do good work, but we do need to remember that there's a huge caseload for the case workers within resolution. I know personally that there's a big turnover of staff, so there's continuity issues, and we need to make sure that we're also picking up the problems as they are. So it's not just opiates and the normal non-opiates, but amphetamines now is a big issue that's taking place in the town.
Coming back in on that one, thank
So,
you.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. So the drug treatment service does treat amphetamines as well. Opiate and crack users are a major proportion, and actually when you look at our unmet need, that's the greatest proportion as well. So that is a strong focus, but amphetamines is obviously part of the service as well, as is alcohol. There is a staff turnover problem, you're right, and it's something we're working on. So they've got a whole plan around recruitment and retention. They've got a member of staff specifically looking at that. They've got a new lead that's to drive forward the strategy so that other people can focus on the caseload, and they're trying to look at everything they can around that. It's a national problem, not just a Luton problem, but with Luton being particularly complex, I think it compounds some of the challenges that we have. So we're aware of it, and it's much better than it was just coming out of COVID. They had a much bigger problem in terms of staffing. So yes, it's in hand and being worked on. The point around rehab, so the clinics, the places that people go to for the rehab element is a very specific part of the pathway. So that's about getting clean, like you said before. Then people can go into treatment. So that's a very specific small cohort. It's only a handful of people that need to go through that process, and they have to be ready and not bounce back round again. So that's handled quite carefully, and there's a whole panel that assesses whether somebody's ready to go. So at the moment, there's not a problem with our rehab places, but we keep it under review all the time, and it link very closely to adult social care. But all of those details around the service are challenging, and we've got a whole improvement plan around that, and working with OHID as part of the drug strategy delivery. So it's challenging, but we've got plans around it.
The other challenge, I believe, is it's a revolving door. So if they're cleaned and they're classified as clean by 6 months, just after that, they could be coming back again. It is, I believe, a revolving door. Not all cases, but a large number of that happens.
Yeah, there's also an indicator within the service around successful completions, and that actually nationally is about 5%, and for us it's a little bit lower, and that's something we're working on as well. But what we're really trying to strengthen at the moment is our recovery offer. So there's a treatment, and then there's a recovery, getting back into the community, getting jobs, all of that bit that we're really trying to strengthen as well. And it's a weaker element of our service at the moment that we're trying to work on as well.
I'll come back to you, but Councillor Bagan.
I just wanted to direct one little, not question, could be question comment to Marek and to Adam. Quite a few years ago, there used to be a program run by Changing Lives Project, which no longer exists anymore. It was a charity that used to go into schools and do a strengthening families, strengthening communities program, which was a 6 to 12 week program, which kind of addresses all of these issues that we're talking about. Certainly, definitely addresses all of these things that we've raised in these reports today, which kind of provides a little bit more knowledge in terms of raising drug and alcohol awareness, gets the parents involved to help understand the children, gets the teachers involved to get the other side of the story as well. And I think that program, I know it's not run anymore, but I think that is something that is perhaps something we can look at as a local authority, because it was quite successful when we did run it in Luton and in London boroughs. So I'm just taking from my own sort of experience what works and what doesn't work.
Comment. So I was actually accredited to deliver that in Luton, and it was a brilliant programme. It isn't delivered now, but there are organisations like Stepping Stones. I was there today for International Women's Day. They deliver parenting courses as well. So there are organisations across Luton that deliver parenting courses like that.
Yeah, so what Stepping Stones sort of, I think they do more towards like the mellow parenting, that sort of parenting strategies. That is very different, because I've been on training for both of those, and I've done all of that facilitating before, and that's very different. Whereas the Strengthening Families one, it looks at that teenager. So the year sixes is what we worked with. We worked with year sixes all the way through to year 10, because of obviously year 11s doing their GCSEs. We never got round to that particular year group. But it does look at all of those elements. It looks at knife crime. It looks literally at everything. And what we used to do is do it through role play, and to show physically demonstrate to the young people what the implications are, as well as to the parents. And it sends out a really powerful message. And I think that's something perhaps we can look at, because it certainly is raised. So when I was looking at some of the comments that Councillor Stevens raised, what the young people are saying, that, you know, don't assume that we're all violent. That's not something that is new. It's something that young people have been saying for generations. And in terms of that, you know, nobody listens to us, nobody understands us, nobody asks us our opinion. As a teaching professional, I hear that every day. I hear that all the time, that, you know, we get asked a question, we answer it, but nobody actually actively listens. So I think when we do these kind of programs, or my experience of running these programs have been that they've been very successful, where it's allowed the young people the platform to raise their voices. So when you were talking about advocating for their voices and making sure their voices are heard, this program itself does send out quite a strong message. So maybe that's something we can look into.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a good sorry, Chair, may I respond to it? Thank you. No, I do remember hearing about the programme and some of the impacts and success, and it's great. I didn't know Gemma had that direct experience, so we'll certainly unpack that and understand what's happened with that. I think there are examples of work going on where we're exploring that area, and in the Dallow Cares pilots, in fact, Dave Collins' service interacted through some of the community networking we did with the ESOL College in Bury Park, which, as you probably know, caters for marginalised women, particularly in the South Asian community, around language skills. But what they were surfacing was huge concerns around parenting skills in relation to exploitation of young people. And Dave has been able to bring resources to that program to start to use the opportunity of English language learning to explore parenting and family issues with those women. We've recently connected them with our family hubs leads, who of course, as you know, are pushing on the services to families and young people through community-based settings, and I'm keen to see how we can develop those kind of community contacts and the right skills in educational programs that can support parents particularly and young people together in those family settings. So we'll take that back. I think there's some emerging partnership work, and maybe what we've learned from the past we can bring into some of that contemporary work that we're doing.
I think if you can take into consideration when doing or drawing up plans for this sort of work, is to take a sort of more person-centered approach or a community-centered approach in terms of making it fit. Because what we did is we made it fit with that particular community that we worked with. So taking into consideration culture, language. So we did it in first language, and making sure that the dialect is also there so that people can understand exactly what's being said and what we're trying to get in terms of our message, what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Chair. My points are directed at David Collins. I just want to pick up a couple of things that you've said earlier this evening when you were delivering your overview, and also earlier on this evening. You said something about head teachers knowing the students from their Key Stage 2 data that will fail. Was that a deliberate choice of words, or do you mean at risk of failure?
Deliberate choice of words. Yeah, I think so. Because I think, you know, personally, if we know someone is likely to fail and it's an expectation and it's a regular thing, then, you know, personally, if I knew that, I'd want to do something about it. And this is not me being critical of head teachers, because like I say, this is in conversation, and I'm sharing conversations with you. But, you know, when if you can judge someone on their paperwork and know that they're likely to fail that transition, and we know that, what we're trying to do is we're trying to work with that to make sure that they're not going to fail that transition. So it was a deliberate choice of words, yeah.
Okay, thank you. But I think we need to be very careful on language choices we use, because language choices affect mindset as well. I mean, some of those students that are at risk of failure, as an educationalist myself, we use at risk. They might have various reasons. It could be special needs. It could be that they've got ESOL problems. They've got ESOL issues. It could be that they've got SEND needs. It could be a range of SEND and ESOL. So to say they're going to be a failure or at risk of or even at risk of failure. We just need to be very careful of that, I think, because otherwise, if we see them as a failure or a potential failure, then we, if we're looking at intervention, could actually take on a negative mindset and say, oh well, that we failed that child, but that's because they're going to fail anyway. Do you see where I'm coming from with this?
Absolutely, and it's a fair challenge, but you know, with respect, I would never talk to a child like that. I'm talking in an adult forum around scrutiny, and I'm using terminology like that because that's what's reflected back from me. But I understand exactly what you're saying, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Without sounding too repetitive of what my colleagues and everybody have said here tonight, I would say thank you for the report across ASB, hate crime, and so many others. I'll just quickly go to what happened last October. I think Adam was part of a group where events that we did at the Futures House, and in that particular group, this particular members and participants just went saying, we're not being proactive enough. And if there's anything, I wanted to please be much more proactive and plan more. And he flared up saying, things happen. We come here, do meetings, repeat the same thing over and over again, and we go back to our house. We don't hear anything again after a while. So if at all, I want to encourage that we become more proactive as we move towards, the summertime and things to make Luton more safer, especially 2040 is the strategy, and of course the strategy by Superintendent. I don't know if you are so confident with that strategy, but I think more can still be done definitely for the collaboration and for better policing of Luton. Thank you.
No, I've been practicing. I'm also been looking at the survey, and it's prompted me to raise something that has been bugging me for many years. If you want to get the young people off the streets, then you need to give them something to do, but it has to be something they actually want to do. And the short sentence that springs out from me in the middle of page 47 is, all schools have great facilities, but they're not available. Well, if you think about it, most school buildings are closed, locked up, unused for more than 80% of the time. And these are valuable and very expensive community assets. It just seems to me there may be an opportunity for Overview and Scrutiny Board to call for a report, a short report, to see if we can come up with some means or influence that the council can bring to bear to make these facilities available, particularly evenings and weekends. It's a scandal that they're closed for more than 80% of the time. It really is. So that's, if Angela and Debbie are listening, that's me asking for a short report.
Fry.
Just in response to some of the issue that Councillor Franks has raised, some schools do actually hire out their premises at weekends and evenings, but it would be nice if we could, to back up what Councillor Franks has said, maybe have a report that suggests how we could make that available more and how it would be funded. Thank you.
I'd like to try and see, it's quite clear from the way that the whole discussion and the whole evening has gone, the huge level of concern and interest that there is in this whole area from the councillors and from the members of this committee. I think what Councillor Abbas said earlier on is extremely relevant. What we have in front of us is, I think he used the term strategy rather than a plan. my feeling from the discussion that's gone on this evening, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my feeling, is that this committee doesn't have any major issues with the strategy. What we have is lots of things we would like to input in terms of the plan. Now, that would suggest to me, and I'm putting the committee as a question, should we specifically either set up a task and finish group to look at some of the more detailed aspects of this whole thing going forward, or should we set up a specific extra OSB committee meeting for us to discuss some of the things? And that really is following along the lines both of what Councillor Abbas has said and effectively what's sitting behind one element of the question that Councillor Franks has put forward. I think that it clearly needs, from the discussion this evening, a lot more time and a lot more detailed discussion. Should we be going for a separate OSB meeting, or should we be going for a task and finish group? What's the view of members?
I certainly think we should have an extra OSB meeting. Otherwise, we could be here till midnight discussing this, because there's just so much I think we really would like to discuss more, I think. Thank you.
I think I would agree with that. I mean, one of the things that I felt was that we wouldn't necessarily give enough time to a lot of the things, because they needed, some of these areas needed probably individual scrutiny, much more scrutiny than we were able to give today, because there were so many items there.
Just a quick thought, Chair, and it may not be completely resolvable tonight, but obviously we have the plan, which we want to, it should be a plan in line with what we're doing as a council, but there needs to be more engagement around the plan as we develop it. So perhaps we could do something that syncs in the end and development of the new CSP plan with what you're proposing. So rather than it being a task and finish group that well, obviously by the nature of task and finish is task and finish, but if we sync it into the development of the actual plan itself, then we can kill a few birds with one stone, as it were. So so we're looking at when's the plan going to be finished, Mark?
So I mean, I think we have a direction of travel and a a focus in the community safety partnership, and with the PCC election, it complicates slightly the public discussion of the future work. So at the moment, we're looking at potentially an executive in June to sign off the plan for the council and the partnership, but subject to the chair's views and others, I'm sure a longer conversation wouldn't do any harm if it gets the plan and right in terms of deliverables. So, we're very open to. I welcome councillors' comments, and as Emma says, the more feedback we can get. And I'd just add that if you haven't been able to pick up anything in your reading and feedback in this discussion, please don't think this meeting is finished. We will continue to talk with you, and if you have other specific issues you want to raise, either with myself and my team or with the theme leads, please make sure that you feed them in, because that will help us to make the plan as good as it possibly can be for the future. Thank you.
I think, bearing in mind what's just been said, I think it would be good if we were to. I will have a discussion with Debbie, and we'll see whether we can bring something to OSB to take this discussion forward. And it may be that it will be a single item only on OSB on this topic. And my current view is that we should try and do that as soon as we can after the PCC election, which I think is the 4th of May, so that we don't introduce complications. So I think something as soon as we can after the 4th of May as a separate OSB meeting just on this topic. Is that something the committee would agree with?
Chair, could I ask one very last question before you close?
Yes, you can, Councillor Stevens. It depends, of course, how long it is.
No, it's a very quick question, and it's to Sergeant. I believe it's to Sergeant Alex. It's with regards.
You need to promote him. You need to promote him, Stephen.
Oh, sorry. How many interventions with the police have been under Clare's law, and how quickly these are dealt with? Because obviously it's varying around the country, but there seem to be a lot of delays in some police forces, and this is a very important topic for abuse against women in a household, domestic abuse. So I thought it was one that was at top of my agenda to ask, but I left it till now. I'm sorry.
What was the exact question? Sorry,
I wonder
sorry.
What are the numbers of interventions with the police, if you like, from ladies or from women? I suppose you ought to say that. I wondered actually when I was looking at the figures whether we ought to also include, although that Clare's law is for women, but I wonder sometimes there are abuse by women against men. And also single-sex abuses, single-sex relationships, and they were kind of left off that report. But if I could stick to Clare's law, what are the numbers that are coming in that you're aware of to Luton Police, and how quickly are they dealt with and followed up? Because we don't want another case in the town of Luton that happened with obviously with Clare.
The short answer is I don't know. I don't have those figures with me at the moment. I do know, however, because it's topical, that it was a question that was raised with our communications team through a freedom of information request only yesterday. So it was mentioned. So I chaired the morning meeting at 9 o'clock this morning, and it was discussed then. Unfortunately, they didn't. They thanked everybody for giving them the data and were passing it on. I didn't get given the data, so I could find out and get back to you on that one if you're interested, but I don't have it to hand. Yeah. How would you like me to communicate them back? How would I get them? Should I go through? Ellie? I'll speak to the comms team and get the answer to that question. So you were looking for numbers in general, specifically looking at and how quickly they're turned around. Yeah, I can come back to you on that one.
I'm very conscious of the time. This is another very long meeting, I'm afraid. I think if I go back, I think that is it happy for me to say that the committee agrees with the strategy that we have in front of us, but that we wish to follow up with a more detailed consideration of the forward plan following the PCC election. Is that fair comment? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry that it's been so long, and I'm sorry you got demoted by Councillor Stevens along the way.
Maybe it's a sign of things to come if the Chief Constable is watching. I don't know.
We have, believe it or not, one more item, which is agenda item 8. Marek, I have to leave it to you to decide how you would best like to deal with this remaining item. I'm sorry.
Chair, if I may say, I think we've covered a lot of what is in agenda item 8 in the sense that we've had a retrospective and forward-looking discussion with the theme leads. So, and we wanted, as we discussed before the meeting with yourself, that we wanted to take questions by exception. There's a lot of detail as to what the partnership has done, its successes, its impacts, and some of the areas it may not have achieved fully on in that report. Again, to the councillor's points that it's been a lot to go through, but the point about presenting it was for accountability, transparency, and I think to help us, based on our past at performance and achievements to frame a strategy that will work for the future. We're concerned about now and the future, obviously, and so I think if there are questions by exception, I'm not going to say anything more about the report and what it sets out. It highlights achievements. The theme leads have put their own views on that. So, is there anybody in the committee any member who wishes to ask any specific questions? Is what I would suggest.
Okay, it looks like we're happy that the past report. I have to say that I think there has been very significant progress made. However, as has become clear, I think the councillors, on behalf of their residents, want to have a lot more reassurance, and we want to make sure that everybody is on board with a common objective. With all that this partnership covers. But thank you very much indeed, everybody, for coming. And I'm sorry it's been another long meeting, but it just shows how much interest there is. Thank you very much.
Good night, all.